Good evening, friends, and good morning, depending on where you are and when you're watching this. I am Ian McKenzie, and I'm delighted to be joined by my good friend Rachelle Lamb here with us in this case study conversation on really the journey and the birth of her own podcast, NVC Life, which we'll get into in just a moment. But first of all, Rachelle, welcome.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
A little context is, Rachelle and I have known each other for a number of years now. I'm guessing maybe 10 almost.
I think about 10 years. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And I've been very fortunate to be in attendance at, I think, two, maybe three of your NVC workshops.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I always find, I need to remember over and over again how to do it well. And of course, you have a sort of a expanded and very rich, I guess, I don't want to call it flavor per se, but yeah, bringing in a lot of influences into your NVC weaving. And it's funny, whenever I look at the sort of basic script, people who don't know, maybe it's nonviolent communication is the acronym there, but there's the script of like, okay, this is kind of how you approach it. And it feels a bit like training wheels. And then when I hear you weave it from a level of, experience and time in, it's like, whoa, it's something else entirely. So
Mm.
it's just, it's great to be around a master of that practice.
Mm. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'd love to just jump into around now this journey of the podcast. So I'd love to hear, what was it that drew you to, be interested in this, in that medium, particularly because, you've had a body of work for some time and you do workshops and one-on-one, support with individuals and couples in lots of different ways. But what was it that drew you to your own curiosity about starting a podcast?
I think what drew me were a couple of things. One of them is I've always loved radio. I like hearing the voice. So that's compelling for me. And then the piece that drew me to start to do it was that there's a lot that I don't say.
Hmm.
Even in my workshops and working with people, it's just either the timing isn't right or it's not what people have come for. And so this is an opportunity for me to start to get those things out into the world.
Hmm.
That's yeah, that was mainly why.
Hmm. And what was the journey of kind of wondering about it? Possibly, what was your current, or when you first started thinking about it, what was your current sort of skill level or experience with the technology and the format? Was it quite new to you? Were you already had previous experience from certain elements? Yeah, curious to get a snapshot.
I didn't really have any experience. It's something I had been thinking about. I've seen, the pop-up videos, "Hey, start a podcast or monetize this, monetize that," and which includes podcasting. So I didn't have a lot of experience, and when I saw that you were offering something, I thought, "Oh, this is a really great opportunity," because I really love how you do your podcast, and
Mm.
it seems like you know what you're doing, right? I wanted to come across as like I might know what I'm doing, even though there
Mm.
are times when I'm scratching my head. But that's really what got me going.
Okay.
Yeah, and I didn't know too much.
Mm.
Mhm.
So then, in terms of what you're referring to actually is the podcasting 101 or intro to podcasting workshop that I did online. This is now about a month to 2 months ago, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was I think it was about a 3 hours, maybe 2 hours, sort of
It
intro.
might have been May or June, actually. Yeah, it's several
Okay.
months ago. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And so what was it in that? I mean, again, as specific as you maybe recall, is a little while ago now,
Mhm.
but what was it perhaps that you took away or that you helped you on your journey in terms of bringing your podcast to life?
Well, you there was a very wealthy, and informative 3 hours. You're very generous with everything
Mm.
that you were sharing, and there was quite a bit there that I didn't know about. Things like transcripts, it's a good thing to be able to transcribe a podcast. So
Yeah.
there were things like that, things about lighting, about the audio, the fact that you were already working from a podcast platform. And because there are so many of them, and I had done research about, oh, which is the best platform. I always look up what's the best of anything. And then, of
Yeah.
course, there's about, 10,000 that show up.
Yeah.
I really appreciated that you had something sound that you were working with. So I just thought it was easier to just go with that. And
Mm.
And that was very useful. I felt very inspired afterwards as well. I need to say that. I mean, it's so easy to get bogged down with the level of detail of doing
Yeah.
anything. And right out of the gate, you were talking about how many hours it takes to create a podcast. So that can be a real turnoff for people. But
Yeah.
I was looking at something more smaller, something more manageable for myself. And so I just thought, wow, this is great. I think I can actually do this. I got quite
Mm,
excited about it.
amazing. And so what was the format then that you developed or that you were thinking of? And, how did you approach then putting that together?
Well, I realized that for a lot of people who are doing podcasts, they are interviewing other people. And that is a big piece of work in and of itself.
Hmm.
So that I wasn't going to be doing that. I was just going to be offering little snippets of things. And that was, 13 minutes. My latest podcast, I think, is 16 minutes long. So I'm keeping it within that range. I
Yeah.
might do some that are longer at some point, and I may interview some people. I do have ideas about doing that. But the fact that it was just something that I could just do every week that was shorter, bite-sized pieces, which I think there's an audience for that too. A lot
Hmm.
of people love podcasts, but they don't have time, uh, you know, as much time as they wish they did for listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear too so the listeners as well, there's multiple different formats you could go with podcasting. There's essentially the interview format, which is what, we referred to there. That's generally the type I craft as well, from the Mythic
Mhm.
Masculine to the Pandemic as a Prism, and then more recently the Crow's Nest. There's also the sort of crafted audio essay or short form is really, I think, what you've also done. Podcasts
Mhm.
like the Emerald is one example too, where they actually add a lot. Josh, the creator of that, uses a lot of auditory soundscapes as
Mm.
well with his sort of crafted essay style audio essay, and they're very powerful. And for yours as well, that they're almost like short essays, really, right, around uh, just NVC, I don't know, questions or practices or things like that. Yeah, I'd love for you to share a little bit more too of like what kinds of um, themes or content, yeah, do you create with these short forms?
Mm. Well, it's called NVC Life. I chose that title because the subtitle to the book, Nonviolent Communication, is a language of life.
Mm,
And over the 20 years that I have been teaching this and working with this model, I have started to wonder about, mm, how effective is this really? I know that it can be very effective interpersonally. I recognize that. But Marshall Rosenberg, who was the, creator of nonviolent communication and author of the book, he had this idea in mind that he wanted it to be used for social change. And I'm not sure, like, how does the interpersonal affect the social change piece? And people will say, well, the world can't get any better unless we're good with ourselves and
mm,
so forth. And at this point, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the case. There is still a world out there, uh, while we're discussing, how come you're not listening to me? And
mm,
I have a need to be heard. I have a need to be seen and so forth. And I'm thinking, maybe we're not listening enough to the rest of the world. So NVC
mm,
Life is speaking about not just your life, the human life, it's speaking about all of life. And I'm trying to bring this together in a way that, maybe people can recognize. It's not good news, actually. It's challenging, I think, for us to think about that, because the idea that, living in a world where everybody's needs can be recognized, it has a certain tonal quality to it when we say it like that. And I'm challenging that notion.
mm,
And maybe we don't really understand needs in the way that we should. We've been given so much. We have so much, at least in our corner of the world, that so we've gotten used to a certain standard. And I
mm,
think it's probably necessary for us to lower our standards around comfort, convenience, mobility, those types of things, so that the world actually has a chance. And so
mm,
our kids and grandchildren have a chance.
mm,
And that's what I'm trying to bring in there, because people usually show up with their problems about, how do I get my kid to do their homework, which is a question right now that's going to be coming up a lot, given that it's back to school time.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm,
yeah.
thanks for that. Again, I highly recommend that the listener check it out, NVC Life. I'm curious, what was it like to launch then? You came to that moment of like, oh, here's the moment I'm gonna, hit, publish to the world. Yeah, what was that moment like?
That was very exciting and scary at the same time. Now, the thing is, because I think the first episode was 13 minutes long. Even though it was only 13 minutes, many hours went into that, which was astounding to me, just how long it actually does take. Now, I'm imagining that over time, I just released my 10th one today, that it will take less and less time. But there is a certain level of, I would say, anxiety that I have every time I hit the, you know, upload button and or schedule the episode. That happens for me
Mm,
because I'm so used to speaking with people like most people, but I have not yet trained myself to speak to a machine
mm,
and have the sense that there's people there. I struggle with that. But yeah, it was very exciting, and I let people know on social media and through my mailing list, and I got a lot of positive feedback for doing that.
mm,
So it was like, yeah, keep going with this.
mm. Amazing. A little context to my own creative background, largely over the last 10, 15 years, has been in film, particularly documentary. And so there's such a lag time typically from, creating and producing and, interviewing in that context until I craft a film and bring that film to the world. Very often takes years. And
Mhm.
so I found podcasting in this case, primarily do the interview format, but to be able to offer something each week with some regularity that was, created and then out to the world, it has been very satisfying in a way that, I didn't necessarily anticipate. Maybe I thought might happen, but I actually find that it's very creatively satisfying to have that kind of quicker turnaround schedule. And it highlights another thing though, for I think a good practice with podcasting is to establish a certain regular schedule that, some podcasting, I mean, Joe Rogan, I think he does like daily or something, like hours, episodes. But for others too, you can be sort of, you can choose your time frames, I think, for releasing, but you should be consistent.
Mhm.
And for example, yeah, once a week, or it could even be once a month, if somebody wanted that. But ideally though, it's really important to just stick with that, so people begin to expect, oh great, and usually another episode of, the podcast is coming out today or this week or something like that.
I really appreciate that. There's a discipline in doing it, and of course, I could just be podcasting whenever I feel like it, but I don't think that's a good idea. I do understand that it's the consistency that has people returning over
Mhm.
and over again. Now that I've only got it's only 10 episodes, but I'm excited about the fact that I'll see that number climb. I'm already in the double digits, 10.
Big
Last week I
deal.
was 9 and now it's
Yeah.
10. And so if I keep going like this, and that's my plan, I like that level of discipline and that it's is manageable for me. And I love that there's the creative aspect as well. And
Hmm.
it is much more immediate. As you say, some projects can take years, months and years to do, but this really takes far less time. And whenever I have an idea, I need to develop the habit of writing it down in the same place because ideas come to me because sometimes the day comes and I'm not sure what I'm going to be talking about exactly. So it's good to have a file that says, how about this? And
Yeah.
choosing things that are relevant to, for instance, last week I released one on education
Mm.
because, it is back to school time. So, yeah.
Yeah, you also highlight a great practice too, which is planning ahead as well,
Hmm.
right? Looking at, yeah, different calendar moments, or, certain holidays, or certain, I don't know, big stories developing that, I don't know, you can plan ahead in a way that also allows you to, for example, if there's a creative burst of energy for a certain amount, of time, or, maybe somebody's got space of 2 weeks, and you can actually produce, right, a number of episodes, and then just schedule them to still come out at the regular intervals, which is
Hmm.
generally a better practice than, for example, yeah, like one after another for a week, and then, nothing for 2 months or something like that.
Hmm.
That can happen if you don't sort of meet out your, creative energy.
Yeah.
So that, again, highly recommended to consider that you will have bursts of creative, you know, just passion of like, yeah, really into it, and other times it's going to lull, where you'll be like, I'm kind of, over it for a little while. But as
Hmm.
long as you're still consistent with your producing, your audience
Hmm.
can still grow.
Yeah. I love that I can spend a day and produce maybe 3 episodes, with some planning in advance,
Yeah.
and that I can upload it, which was very convenient while I was recently away on holidays. So I didn't have to
Hmm.
worry about it, but every Tuesday it was coming out.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so, how has the general sense of the audience grown? I mean, I can just say it's very good to be consistent over time and not to expect too much out of the gate in terms of growing a listenership. But yeah,
Mhm.
I'm just curious for you, how has that felt in terms of, seeing more and more folks kind of be drawn and, begin listening and maybe sending feedback or comments?
One thing I'm not really good at is the Google Analytics. I mean, that's
Sure.
what I have to be reading, right, to find out how many people are listening, and so that's one thing that I'm going to be working on is just seeing, but I do see the lines, and I do see that every week when it comes out that the lines are going up, and I do imagine that it's going to take a little bit of time, but nonviolent communication is something that is widely searched, and there are
Uh-huh.
not a lot of podcasts on nonviolent communication. So, just a
Okay.
handful. And so in
Yeah.
that sense, I kind of feel like I'm a pioneer in, NVC podcasting. Yeah.
Come to dominate the niche.
Yeah, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, then
Yeah.
another question too is around, I guess, going back to the overall intention, right? That, yeah, like you said, I mean, there was, a creative curiosity. It seemed there's certain things that you felt you don't typically say in a workshop, or you want to say in a certain fashion. How about, how does this correspond to the goals you have? For example, getting more clients, or simply, being able to participate in the wider conversation. Like, how do you know when it's useful and successful?
Well, I will know it's useful and successful, I think, when I start to get maybe invitations to be interviewed, which I
Mm,
have already in the past. But I would imagine that because I'm taking a particular angle, looking at NVC in a different way, that might be something that draws people in. It can also, it's not for everyone. Some people might not like it. They like the touchy feely aspect of nonviolent communication, which is one of the things I'm actually calling into question. So for people who appreciate the more, I guess, revolutionary approaches, that was one of the things I really admired about Marshall Rosenberg. I thought he was
mm,
revolutionary, and when I see that NVC starts to, let's say, become mainstream, I get worried because the mainstream isn't that great. So
mhm,
I think there's plenty that still requires a revolutionary approach so that we really rethink, ask a lot of questions, wonder a lot. Like, how great is NVC? Is it really that great? So I ask
mm,
questions like that. So I'm imagining I'm going to be drawing people who have a little bit of a rebellious streaks, and also very curious about, well, how do I handle relationships then in the wake of all this? I mean, even as the ship's going down, which is one of the things I, speak about, even as it's going down, there's relationships, there's laundry to be done, there's
mm,
groceries, there's people to be fed. All of these things need to be attended to in the relational realm. And
mhm.
so, but so I'll know when I start getting more emails. And I tend to work organically. I actually don't worry so much about what the numbers are telling me. um, I
Mhm,
probably should, but I'm just not wired that way.
mhm.
I'm doing this right now. It's a labor of love because I think it's necessary. I really think
Yeah,
it's necessary. That's why I'm doing it.
yeah, yeah, beautiful. I mean, it does highlight again, what I encourage creatives is to define, right? What are the goals, and what does
Mhm.
success look like? Because oftentimes, if it is just a numbers game in terms of listeners, that can look good in certain ways, but then if it doesn't translate actually into what those defined goals are, then, again, it's not really that helpful. And
Mhm.
so I find, for a creative actually to come to that understanding, then it becomes easier to hit the mark, right? To say, oh, actually, I'm not even, wanting to worry about this side, because this side is actually more important to me.
Mhm.
For example, or this is what I want to, have this translate to in terms of the effort. I should say, in terms of format, that with podcasting as well, it is natural, I think, to evolve over time, right? Like how you might craft an episode, early days, And as you develop with it, as you learn the format more, as it just evolves in terms of the thematic ecosystem that you cover, you'll start to develop a deeper sense of your own voice in this format, possibly even shift to for example, you could have really key interviews with rebel NVC folk at a certain
Mhm.
point, and that's also okay. Like, to shift formats
Mhm.
within this kind of structure is actually great. It can keep your listeners engaged, and
Mhm.
I think also to share along the way, like, your own creative process can be helpful, right? That this is also a chance for that level of kind of creative transparency with your listeners, right?
Mhm.
Like, oftentimes I'll release like bonus episodes where it might just be me riffing about the format, right, or about the creation of it, which I think listeners can really appreciate, especially as they develop quite a relationship with you, the host, through many, as the episodes grow. Like, I get folk reach out and they'll say, oh, I just, I was away off grid camping and I downloaded 10 episodes, and it was so great to listen to your conversations, while looking up at the stars. And it's just so great to hear those kind of contexts, right, for people experiencing this, and they feel like they know me in a certain way, as this presence in their lives, right?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a humble um, recognition, I think, to know that, okay, you can really have a certain familial presence for folks, even though you've never met them.
Mhm. Mhm. No, that is a pretty, uh, it's a sweet gift for sure,
Mhm.
and I have had a few people let me know that it's been very meaningful for them to hear what I was saying about NVC and how it
Mhm.
connects to the rest of life and the rest of the world, etc. Yeah. And I love that piece about how it evolves, because I can imagine that it could be like things that I've written in the past. When I go back and look at them, I'm going, I can't believe I wrote that. I might even listen to my first episode and be thinking
Oh
that
yeah.
thought. I don't know. We'll see.
That's actually, it could be a great format as you go back and read old writing, right? And be like,
Yes.
okay, on this episode, I'm going to read my old writing and critique myself in terms of,
Yeah. Yeah.
how it is now, and whatever. That could be a really playful format too, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
lots of places to go. So I'd love to direct the listener or the viewer to your website, actually, where they'll find, maybe you could share a little more about what's there and the kinds of offerings you do, in general.
Sure. My work is of course nonviolent communication, and need to say that it is there are a lot of threads attached to it, so it's a kind of a hybrid nonviolent communication. But I work with individuals, I work with couples, I offer trainings, I have online trainings that you started during the course of the pandemic and are still ongoing. I also work within organizations. I've had people contact me and I've been able to do online, and, some in person will be starting up again. But that's the nature of the work. And, you can go there and look under my services and you'll find it all there.
Mhm.
Mediation as well is in there. Yeah.
And NVC Life, so there's a link under the podcast, I suppose. But somebody can also just search on any platform, Spotify, Apple, I believe, or NVC Life, and they'll find it.
They'll find it. They should find it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Okay, well, Rachelle, I feel short and sweet, and appreciating our time together with, that I was supportive in some way in your journey to bring this podcast to life. And thanks for sharing a bit of the journey with the listeners here today.
Yeah. And thanks so much, Ian, and for all your help in getting it off the ground.
And may we continue.
Yes.